John Scott here with Jonathan Acosta and Vic Carucci, all three of us with microphones. Vic is very, very pleased here after the Bills win on Thursday Night Football over Miami, 31-21 here, a game much closer and tighter, almost start to finish, than any of us anticipated.
I told you guys before the game that it's a division game. The Dolphins are 0-2. They're sort of fighting for their season. The Dolphins, when they came to Orchard Park last year, was a close game that the Bills had to win on a last-second field goal. So I think the conventional wisdom said that the Bills are a much better team. They should win this game. But how often do we see it play out? These AFC East matchups sometimes are a lot tighter than we think it is. Deion Dawkins spoke to that effect in the locker room, that whether it's the Jets, whether it's the Patriots, whether it's the Dolphins, these guys always come in here and give this team their best shot. I think for Buffalo, we're going to nitpick some things later on, but the most important thing for them is that they came out with the win and that they're now 3-0 on the season.
You're entitled to the I told you so, because absolutely, we were in the newsroom and you said very much that. And fine, here's what I think. The Thursday turnaround factor is a thing. Not always, but obviously it played some role in this. Most of all, I saw the better team not always play like the better team, but maintain its level. That when you watched it, I don't know that I had a doubt that the Bills were going to win the game. It was just a matter of how easy it would be. And it wasn't, and there were flaws in all three phases for them. I think that's the good news, is that they can have those flaws, be 3-0, do what they're supposed to do against an inferior opponent, and again, continue to set themselves up with the way the schedule plays out in a place where they can continue to be, on this climb to what I don't know if the word is dominant, but at least upper tier status in the AFC.
We'll start on the defensive side of things, because that's really what put the icing on the cake of this one. A phenomenal play by Terrel Bernard, who just seems to have a knack for finding the football, making plays, which is so ironic because the man he replaced, that was the biggest knock on Tremaine Edmunds, was as talented as he was physically, he never came out and made the splash plays. That was the word around Tremaine that he lacked doing there. Terrel Bernard does it all of the time here, it seems, especially when it matters most. And the most fascinating part of it was the amount of people explaining, including TB himself, film study is the reason the play was made.
That it was something that he had seen with like Al Holcomb, and Sean McDermott even said that it was something that popped up in the previous game against the Jets a couple times, where they got the look that should have keyed him in on something. They didn't take advantage of it. This time, he said it's a sign of growth that TV saw it this time and did take advantage of it. We asked Taron Johnson in the post-game locker room, how realistic is it for this Bills defense that they don't always get this stop, right? The Dolphins are 10 of 15 on third down in this game, but they always seem to come up with a takeaway in the key moment. How realistic is it for them to keep depending on that? Taron Johnson said it is realistic because it's something that they've done over and over and over again, not just this season, but the season before. He said that he feels that they have closers that can close out the game. Terrel Bernard, a key example of that. His 11th takeaway since 2023, fourth most in the NFL.
It's almost freakish, the amount of turnover success, winning the turnover battle, and how it equates to their success as a team. Look, it's no accident that a Sean McDermott team is built that way. That is his greatest emphasis, always has been throughout his coaching career as a defensive backs coach, as a defensive coordinator. He always stresses the turnover win, if you will, winning that battle. And that was the strength of what this defense was last year. Didn't always do the stops when it had to, but it did that. Once again, in the game against the Dolphins, you didn't see the stops you needed to see. It got better in the second half, but it was the turnovers. And let's add Deion Walker to that conversation, because the rookie, his pass rush and exactly what this team was looking to get when it emphasized defensive line additions in the draft. He's one of them. The fourth-round pick comes through with the pressure that throws Tua Tagovailoa just off enough for Terrel Bernard, through really good coaching, as you mentioned, to be in position to make the play.
What's fascinating is talking to Tre'Davious White and others about the idea of a player trusting what they see in film. And Trey said, it's tough because there's times, as great of a player as you are, you can even have a fraction of a second, and that's the difference between some of these plays. So for Bernard to trust what he saw, trust what the coaches pointed out for him, and break on that ball, because we've also seen how he can go the other direction.
Sure.
You read it wrong, you break, and that's going another way for a touchdown.
I do want to go back and highlight Deion Walker because it wasn't just that pass rush on the interception, but he flashed at other points in the game with run stuffs. He had almost, I think, a sack on Tua Tagovailoa on a third down that I think he slipped out of, where it was Achane breaking out of it. But that's what you want to see, especially out of a rookie defensive lineman, right? Like, he's not going to be this consistent player who is excellent throughout the whole game, but you want to see the splashes. You want to see the big playability from a big guy like Deion Walker to disrupt the game. That's what you want out of that interior defensive line. And I think the Bills might have found themselves a gem in the 4th round. Remember, Deion Walker, after his sophomore year of college, was being projected as a first-round pick, right? Then he has the injury his junior year in college. I think that sends him down the draft board a little bit, but it really seems like Brandon Beane, I think that's sort of the thought process, right? Where you throw a lot of the darts at the dartboard, right, on defense, and you say, hey, 1 or 2 of these guys have to hit, and that certainly seems like Deion Walker's sort of trending in that direction as a rookie.
You know, it was notable to listen to Josh Allen after the game talk about this team having room to grow, right? Or needing to grow as a team because it's young, because of these young pieces. And I think that's his way. He didn't single out Deion Walker or any other rookie, but he didn't have to. You know, we know this team is comprised, some key elements of it are young people needing to step up, and some older players like a Shaq Thompson, and Dorian Williams, who, for their part, look, Matt Milano at his best is one of the best. He's an all-pro. We know what that is. I don't know that we're going to see that Matt Milano version ever again. And we didn't see him in this game, obviously because of that pectoral injury. We don't know how long he's going to be out. But let's talk about next man up, and Walker, and obviously Williams and Shaq Thompson both did their part to make a little bit of a gap-filling point in that defense. Now, maybe that had something, Milano's absence had something to do with the third down conversions failing as much as they did in the first half. But let's give credit to those other 2 for stepping up.
An interesting thing, schematically, just to note with the Bills, we know their base defense for years and years and years has been Taron Johnson at the nickel. This season, they're taking Taron Johnson off the field far more than maybe he has, at least since he's elevated into one of the best nickels in the league, and going more with a 4-3 base. And that's why you see someone like Shaq Thompson, or even earlier in the year when Milano was healthy, Dorian Williams getting extra run on the field. Just an interesting nugget there as you're watching this team moving forward. Of so many people talk about Sean McDermott and his defense and his inability to adapt and change. You're seeing him do that with personnel groupings here along with Bobby Babich. You're also seeing him, I don't sit and dig into all 22, but from things that I see, and they're also playing more man than they've ever played either.
The one thing I want to ask you guys is, through 3 weeks, right, what's our overall thoughts on this defense? Is it good? Is it average? Is it bad? Because we've seen it sort of all over the place, right? Against the Ravens, not good at all. In this Dolphins game, sort of that in between, right, where they were good on first and second down, point that Sean McDermott made, it was just third down where it lacked. And then we saw it be sort of that dominant defense against the Jets. So I think the question a lot of us are asking ourselves right now is, what do we make of this Bills defense? Because we've seen it sort of all over the place.
Well, I'm not going to put it in any, category of dominant or smothering. I mean, it played that way against the Jets. But that's
they're the Jets.
They are the Jets, and they didn't show up for that game. So I think you've got to put an asterisk on that performance. The Raven game was awful defensively in so many ways, except for Ed Oliver. And then we see him get the injury between the Ravens and Jets game in practice. So we'll see what his status is with the extra time to recover, to come back, and maybe we'll see him on the field against the Saints. It depends with the ankle injury. And then Matt Milano, who, you can't rave about anything that anybody other than Oliver did against the Ravens, but Milano, up to the time he got hurt, seemed to be reasonably involved in that Jets game in a good way. So the injuries are a thing. Taron Johnson's absence in that Jet game, a thing. But to John's point about how these guys are being utilized, personnel being utilized and taking Johnson off the field in these situations, the Bills schematically are trying to do some different things. Are they doing all these different things because they don't really know what they have in the way of personnel? That they have these young people, TJ Sanders and Deion Walker and other youthful players that they need to rely on so much that perhaps mixing and matching and all this different stuff is a mold or a clump of clay, say, that has to be molded into something, and maybe we won't know, guys, until mid-season.
Right, because the mixing and matching is going to continue, right? Because you're going to get Max Hairston back at some point. You're going to get Larry Ogunjobi. You're going to get Michael Hoyt. So that's why I made the question, because it's still early and it's far from the final version of this Bills defense that we're going to see.
I'm going to look around and see if Brandon Beane's close, because I'm going to say, could we ask the same question about the Bills' offense through the first 3 games, and especially maybe guys and their ability to get open at the wide receiver position here? Listen, I get it. It's remarkable the caliber of this offense with Josh Allen and company, that we could sit there and say, that didn't look all of that impressive, and it's 31 points, and a week ago it was over 400 yards, and that kind of seems to be what this unit does week in and week out, week in and week out. They were great for the early portion of that first half, most of the first half. It's almost like the Matt Prater shank really kind of shifted things for a while, and then they had the Khalil Shakir drive down there. But this Miami defense stinks, and they were depleted in the secondary, and it seemed like there was just too large of a lull in the middle of this game for as high-powered as the Bills' offense is against this depleted Dolphins defense.
I think it's one of those things where the box score, if you just look at it, doesn't give you the full picture, as opposed to if you watch the game with your eyes. If you watch this game with your eyes, you say to yourself, and I was saying it to myself on the sideline, there's a gear missing from this offense. And I don't know if it's recency bias, but in my head, I think back to the second half of last season after the Amari Cooper trade. And I don't remember these stretches in games where this offense felt like it did during this game, where it's just like the lack of a rhythm, right? Or even Joe Brady's play calling. I feel like it's been more questionable this year than it has been last year. Again, I don't know if that's the recency bias speaking. It easily could be. But just certain situations where you feel like it's predictable, right? James Cook run on first down, short gain, throw it on second down, now you're in third and long, and then you end up punting the ball. It just... Again, to your point, that second half, it felt like a lack of rhythm that we're not used to seeing out of this Bills offense.
Absolutely right. Disjointed in many ways. What has been the consistent part of this offense in 3 games? James Cook.
Yeah, the running game.
The offensive line helping that run game. So the run game is solid. And foundationally, and I'll give them this much credit. I'll give Joe Brady this credit, Sean McDermott this credit. Lean on what is the strength. Don't worry that, okay, you've got the MVP quarterback and you're paying him $250 million in guaranteed money that you gave him in the offseason, because believe me, that can influence a lot of decisions when it comes to the business side of this game. In the eyes of the Bills, it's more about what can you do to win, and Josh Allen, to his credit, you don't see a guy up there kind of moping about his situation. He seemed pretty... I thought lighthearted about the fact that, hey, came out with a win. He was joking about it. I'm sure he didn't love where this passing game was, and I think the same problem exists. You brought up Amari Cooper and how they made that move at the trade deadline last year to try to bolster their receiving attack. That hasn't been the same since Stephon Diggs was left this football team, or they booted him from this football team. They still have. They don't have. At Stephon's best, they don't have that, and their receiving core continues to struggle to get open.
They're missing that downfield element, right? And I think the Ravens game skews things, because in the fourth quarter it felt like that Ravens defense was playing a little bit off, so that's where Josh was able to get in that rhythm with Keon Coleman and everything. But you watch this passing attack the last 2 games, there's not that explosiveness, and again, it's the lack of a rhythm that I think doesn't concern you, but it's something that you're nitpicking out of an offense that's obviously very good to have these issues and still score
31 points. Yeah.
Right, I mean, here is, again, it's the personnel thing. 2 off seasons ago, the only real investment after they get rid of Stephon Diggs is Curtis Samuel. That guy did nothing last year, and he's a healthy and active this year. Yeah. Your big investment in the wide receiver position this offseason was Josh Palmer. He didn't even see a target until less than 8 minutes left in this game here. And outside of the fourth quarter against Baltimore, just like Coleman, he really has not been a factor in this offense as well. It's early. We are, you could say, nitpicking, but every single time with this team, you cannot look at it as a singular game or a 3-game thing. We are looking at January, and they have a long runway here to get everything up to speed here. But the everybody eats mantra is great when you're still scoring 30 points, But somebody has to eat at some point in January when it matters the most. And I think we all can agree, even when Stephon Diggs was on this team, that hasn't happened.
So that's the nitpicking. If we want to look at a positive, I think something that has not been a strength necessarily the past couple years, but that looks like a real strength right now, that tight end room and the balance between Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox and Jackson Haas. Jackson Haas gets his first career touchdown catch today. I think we've seen so far that he's a phenomenal blocker. I think Brandon Beane said that he was the best run blocker that they evaluated, right? But
Ever.
we've seen ever.
Yeah.
Like high praise. But we've seen his ability to be involved in the passing attack. He had the big catch against Baltimore that set him up right here on the edge of the goal line that set up a touchdown, and now actually catching a touchdown pass here. Dalton Kincaid, I think this was one of his better games as a Buffalo Bill, right? Getting involved early, stayed involved, had a drop. It seemed like that could have been a second touchdown. It would have been a tough catch.
It was.
Yeah,
You could go either way, however glass full you want to be.
But
John and I were kind of trying to figure that out up in the press box.
But to his credit, made a really good play for the touchdown that he did score in this game. Was the Bills' leading receiver, I believe, right? 5 receptions for about 66 yards, 70 yards, something like that. He looked finally like the kind of guy that I think we maybe saw glimpses of before the injury last year, because last year I remember there was a few games where they seemed to try to get him involved early and then the game script sort of forced him to go away from him.
Right.
But I think this is the type of performance from Dalton Kincaid that you really wanted to see out of him coming into an important year 3.
I think the Haas dimension as a very capable, more than capable blocker who can also do some things as a receiver is something this team hasn't had. It's either receiver or blocker, and having a guy who can at least in a very short sample size or small sample size demonstrate that he can do both, and he's been a reasonably effective blocker in the previous games, is a plus. You're right. The tight end room could be. Now we're back to the growth thing, because Haas is a rookie. Now let's see how this expands, how this grows from here, to Josh Allen's point about a team with room to grow.
I want to finish here on Miami, because some people thought, if they lose, if it's bad, Mike McDaniel, I think he's still on the hot seat certainly here. I come out of this game with less criticism on Mike McDaniel for his coaching, and I'm falling more so than I ever have on, man, is Tua Tagovailoa just not it. I mean, I didn't think he was a franchise guy, but I just don't – I almost feel like they need to consider Zach Wilson sooner rather than later, because you are going nowhere with a guy who's literally throwing it at or behind the line of scrimmage almost the entirety of his night. You talk about stat looking, it's just like a 75% completion rate, but he's averaging like 4 yards of completion.
Right. It's so important in the current day NFL for players to be quarterbacks to be able to make plays out of structure, right? When the play falls apart, can get outside the pocket, find the guy down the field, right? And that the Dolphins have weapons that should allow a quarterback to be able to do that. The speed of Devon Achane out of the backfield, the speed of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill at wide receiver. You would be expecting explosive pass plays down the field out of this offense all the time. But Tua Tagovailoa, the book is out on him, right? He's a limited quarterback that if you force him off his first read, things don't go so well, and that's why he just ends up checking it down to where their best play is, dumping it off to Devon Achane behind the line of scrimmage and let him go get yards after the catch. You see the lack of arm strength out of Tua Tagovailoa to really push the ball down the field. I don't know if it's necessarily Zach Wilson territory, but in terms of a bigger picture lens on this team, it really feels like a quarterback who is more athletic, can stay healthy more consistently, and with a bigger arm would be beneficial for Mike McDaniel, considering the other pieces that are in this offense.
It feels like Mike McDaniel, went into this game with in terms of preparing a game plan, hot seat or not, he knows what he has at quarterback, a very limited guy, and it felt intentionally like this was about get fast guys in space as much as possible. McDaniel knows it. How many downfield shots is he really going to be comfortable calling? As you did mention the out of sync or out of script plays or off script plays where he did try to throw downfield, and he has a wide open receiver down there. Was it I forget
Hill,
who?
maybe.
Yeah, Hill, wide open and punts it. I mean, it was just an air ball that just. By the time it got to Hill, that was the play. I think Terrel Bernard got,
or was it the one that
Christian
Benford
got hurt on.
Okay,
Christian Benford got hurt on it. So that to me is you're absolutely right about where this team is or isn't. I don't know if if that heater got turned down a little bit on McDaniel, because frankly I didn't see drastically bad coaching on the part of the Dolphins. I just see a team that, between maybe being not having the best of personnel, and that's on the GM, Chris Greer, and the injuries that happened to starting offensive linemen down, and even with that, I think they were in this game. So we'll see where it goes. But the AFC, it brings us to the AFC East discussion, which is, okay, these guys are buried pretty much at 0-3. Jets
could be 0-3. They're facing 2-0 Tampa.
So let's toss them out while we're here. And then New England, the only sort of, quote, wild card, if you will.
With one win.
With one win.
So far.
Okay.
I will say the Dolphins looked like a team that at least hadn't quit on their head coach. But bad teams do find ways to lose in games in which they're close against other good teams. What's the big difference here? A couple of crucial personal foul penalties that extended Bills' drives or set them up for points, and then obviously the turnover.
Undisciplined.
Right.
That's undisciplined, and that's on coaching.
That was a point that you made earlier, right, where the Bills are the better team, right, and they didn't drop that level. The Bills didn't make the key mistake in this game that the Dolphins did.
All right, now we don't get a week and a half off. I wish we did, but the Bills are going to here. Next game is going to be a week from this upcoming Sunday. The Saints, one of the worst teams in football, coming in here. We'll see if the extra rest will get some of these wounded guys like Matt Milano and Oliver back onto the field for them, and also if maybe a little early reset in the season can make this team handle business against a lesser opponent the way they should have probably this evening.
And it's a 1 o'clock kickoff.
Oh, thank goodness.
Nice.
As Sean McDermott's watch was beeping at the end of his press conference, and he said, it's time for me to go to bed.
Mine's beeping too.
Me too. All right, with Vic Carucci and Jonathan Acosta, I'm John Scott for Channel 2 Sports.